It's me, Mrs. B, the book lady. I'm here to talk to you today about the Iowa Children's Choice Awards. This award was started way back in 1978 by the Iowa Association of School Librarians. And its purpose was to encourage kids like you to read more good books and also to recognize outstanding American authors. Now, what's unique about this award, it's only kids in Iowa in grades 3 through 6 who can vote for their favorite book. You'll do this at the end of March. Now, what else is unique about it is that all of these books were nominated by kids just like you. So this year, as you're reading books and I think other kids in Iowa would like to read this book too, take your author and your title to the library and we'll see about getting your nomination on the list for next year. Now, there's 2 rules. 1, it has to be written by an American author, and 2, it has to be written within the last 5 years. So all of these books are relatively new books. I think most of them were written in 2022, so that's pretty new, isn't it? Now here's the fun part. If you, yes you, can read at least 2 books by the end of March, you will get to vote for your favorite book, and it will go on to see what is the favorite book of the kids in Iowa in this school year. Now, I have been giving my book talks now, are you ready for this? 20 years. I know. All summer long, I read the books, and then in the fall, I come and talk to classes and tell you about the different books. This year, there are 20 books on the list. Now, each of you have your bookmark, and I'm going to go right down the list in alphabetical order by title. So as I'm talking, if you think, I'd really like to read that book, I'd like you to draw a circle around the title. If there's a book you think, I can't wait to read this book, I want you to put a little star next to it. And then when you go to the library, take your bookmark with you and see which book you can check out. Now, Mrs. Bradley has these books on top of a bookcase right across from her desk, so they're very handy to find. Also, all of these books from the Iowa Children's Choice list for this year have a light purple sticker on the spine. There are other Iowa Children's Choice books in there with other colors, but for you to be able to vote in March, you need to read 2 that have the purple stickers on them, okay? All right, now I would love to stop and get some feedback from you and answer questions, but I don't have time for that. But I do want some feedback. So, as I'm talking about a book, if you have a connection with a book, do you do this for connections or do you do this? Okay, you do this? Okay. So if you have a connection with a book, give me the connection sign and I'll see it. That'll make me happy. And I gotta tell you, I have connections with some of these books that I'll be sharing with you. Okay, so let's begin. Like I said, I'm gonna go right down the list. Our first book has what's called alternating chapters. That means that the chapters flip back and forth and we get to read the story from different main characters' points of view. Now, the cool thing about it this year, there are quite a few books that have alternating chapters, and I will be handing those or telling you more about those as we come up to them. A Duet from Home, as I said, has alternating chapters that tells the story from 2 characters' points of view, June and Tyrell. After June's dad dies, her mom goes into this deep depression, and it's up to June to take care of her little sister, Maybelle. When Mom doesn't go to work, she loses her job. When she doesn't pay the rent, they get kicked out of their apartment. And now June and her family are at a homeless shelter called Huey House. Tyrell has been living at Huey House now for 3 years, and he knows his way around. Tyrell and his best friend Jeremiah decide they're going to take June and Maybelle under their wing and show them how to survive in a homeless shelter. And then the city adopts a new policy about homeless people. And this policy is not going to help the residents of Huey House. The kids know they need to do something to fix it, but what can they do? They're just kids. What will it take? A duet from home? Falling Short is about two friends. And it has the alternating chapters again. It's told from the story from two boys' points of view, Isaac and Marco. And the guys have been best friends since they were in kindergarten. And now that they're in middle school, it's more important than ever that they have each other's back. Although the guys are best buds, they are very different. Isaac is tall, he's athletic, he loves to play basketball, but he's kind of irresponsible, and he doesn't turn in his homework and on time, and he's just has trouble with schoolwork. Marco, on the other hand, is rather small for his size, or for his age. He calls himself fun size. He is very smart, and he has won numerous academic awards. Unfortunately, both boys have issues with their dads. Isaac's folks argue a lot, and a lot of times they're fighting about his schoolwork. Marco's parents know they're arguing too, and Marco knows that he has been a big disappointment to his dad. And the boys decide things are going to change. They both set some goals. Isaac's going to be a better student. He's going to turn in his homework on time. And maybe his folks will quit fighting so much. Marco thinks, I'm going to join the basketball team, even though he's very short. Maybe his dad will come to the games and be proud of him. Will the boys be able to meet their goals, or will they keep falling short? "5 years ago, and finally seen, Lena and her family were living in China. And then Dad decides that he's going to go to college in America. So Mom and Dad take the little sister with them to America, and they leave Lena in China living with her grandparents. But now, her family is finally going to be reunited, and Lena is so excited. But when she gets to America, it isn't exactly what she thought it would be like. Mom had been writing her letters back in China saying, oh, they had a nice big house and everything's really wonderful. But when she gets here, she finds out that Mom and Dad are really living in a cramped apartment and money is very tight. Dad is working long hours on a farm, and Mom has started an in-home business where she makes bath bombs. And Lena soon finds out that she can help sell the bath bombs when she decorates them with her artistic skills. Well, as you can imagine, having lived in China all that time, she doesn't know English that well, and she has difficulty in school. So the school gets a teacher for her to help her learn English, and Mrs. Ortiz, the teacher, suggests that Lena read a book called Flea Shop. Lena loves it, and she has all these connections because Flea Shop is a book about a girl who comes to America from China. They have all these connections. She likes it so much that she goes to her teacher and says, hey, would you read this book to the rest of the class? Well, the other kids love it too. And then somebody complains that a book about Asian immigrants was not an appropriate thing to read to the class. What? Lena realizes that she must find the courage to speak up, share her feelings, and be finally seen. Every summer, Mia and her mom would go and spend the summers with Grandma in Maine, and that was their home away from home. But this summer's different. Mom's going to stay in Ohio. She and her boyfriend are looking for a new house. Dad has a new wife and a new baby. And Grandma has a new neighbor named Cayman. Now Cayman and Mia are about the same age, but there's something about Cayman that just rubs Mia wrong. Cayman is bossy and he thinks he knows something about everything. But he did take her out to the point to see the new baby eagles. And when they're there, they discover a white bird of prey that no one has ever seen before. What kind of bird is it? Well, in Mia's haste to find out more about the bird before Mr. Know-It-All Neighbor can, she makes a big mistake. She does something that she shouldn't do. And now the bird is in danger, and the quiet quaintness of Grandma's hometown is being destroyed. How could Mia do this to her home away from home? Our next book is about a bird also, this time a hummingbird. You'll meet a girl named Olive, and Olive has a very rare disease called osteogenesis imperfecta. And it just so happens that the author has this same disease. Now, with this disease, your bones are very brittle and they break easily. Well, because of her condition, Olive gets around using a wheelchair, like on the front here, and she also has always been homeschooled. But now Olive feels that it is time. She really wants to go to regular school, and she really wants to have a best friend. She's never had one before. Well, the first day of classes, she learns about the legend of the hummingbird. This is an elusive, magical bird that can grant wishes. And Olive knows right away what she wants to wish for. She would like to have bones that were strong, that wouldn't break so easily. Well, anyway, when she gets her wish, or she wants to have her wish come true, and so she and her best friend Grace, she does have a best friend now, she and Grace start solving the riddle about where to find the hummingbird. All of the conditions seem to be right now. There's white feathers flying through the air, which is a clue that the hummingbird is going to come back after 60 years. And they find out that they aren't the only ones looking for the hummingbird. And Olive starts to think, am I being selfish, just making a wish for myself? What would you wish for if you found the hummingbird? The Hurricanes of Weakerville is a story about baseball and not giving up even when things seem impossible. Alex loves everything about the game. Unfortunately, he's a klutz and he doesn't actually play baseball. Alex's grandpa Ira owns an independent league baseball team called the Hurricanes. And it's Alex's job to take all the stats and keep notes over the game. He does an excellent job. But not everyone shares the enthusiasm for baseball as Alex and his grandpa. They're rarely fans in the stands. When Alex's grandpa dies unexpectedly, Alex is devastated. And in Grandpa's will, there are several surprises. I'm not going to share them with you. You're going to have to read the book. But I will tell you the bottom line is, Grandpa said, unless the Hurricanes make it to the playoffs with Alex as the manager, the team will be disbanded. What? That's impossible. The team hasn't even had a winning season in years. But Alex, with the help of his friends, decide they're going to go for it. It's what Grandpa has wanted. As you can imagine, there's many problems with Alex as the manager. But we wonder, can Alex save the hurricanes of Weakerville? Read the book to find out. Lasagna Means I Love You is a story about Mo. And she's a girl that has been raised by her grandma, but now Grandma has died. And Alex writes letters to Grandma telling her about what's been happening in her life. It's a form of journaling. And I want to share with you that this is the journal that I used to write letters to my mom after she died. And I haven't written for a while, but after reading Lasagna, I think I'm going to start writing to my mom again. And it's got her favorite blue butterflies on the front of it. Lots has been going on in Mo's life to write about. Mo's only living relative now is her Uncle Billy. And Uncle Billy is in the military, and he can't take care of an 11-year-old, so he puts her in foster care. And something else that Mo has to deal with. Grandma had told her that she needs to get a hobby. And Mo thought, what could I have for a hobby? And then she comes across a homemade cookbook with family recipes in it. And not only do they have yummy recipes, but there are stories that go along with the recipes that tell like who used to make it or when it was served, and helpful hints on helpful hints on how to make the recipes. And Mo thinks, this is so cool. And she decides right then and there she's going to teach herself to cook using these recipes. Hey, that could be her hobby. Well, you know, things don't always go like you think they're going to. First time she tries to bake bread in her first foster home, she starts the oven on fire. Nobody gets hurt, but there's a lot of smoke. And as a result, she doesn't last long in that first foster home. Well, the second foster home is a little bit better. In fact, her foster dad helps her set up a website so she can tell other people about her new hobby. And Mo is thrilled when she starts getting responses, people sending in recipes and their stories. And she is just thrilled. And fun news, the recipes are included in this book so you can make the recipes yourself. But you know what Mo longs for the most? She really would like to have a recipe from her own family. Grandma hadn't been much of a cook. And she'd really like to be able to fix a dish, take it to the table with a family that loves her, and say, lasagna means I love you. Lines of Courage is a historical fiction book, which means that it's based on something that really happened in history, but it's a made-up story. This story takes place during World War I, which happened between 1914 and 1918. It's a story about 5 kids in 5 European countries and what they did to survive during this very difficult time. You will meet Alex from Austria-Hungary, and his dad is off fighting in the war. Felix and his mom struggle to survive when Russian soldiers take over their town. There's Kara from England. She and her mom are serving on a Red Cross train, and it's their job, it's like a hospital train, and it's their job to go from the battlefields, pick up wounded soldiers, and take them to local hospitals. Jeanette is from France, and she's desperately seeking and searching for her family. They were separated when they were fleeing from the invading German troops. Dmitry is from Russia. He's only 14 years old. and he was sent to the front lines without a gun to defend himself. Then there's Elsa. Her dad is watching over the prisoners of war. Elsa raises homing pigeons in hopes that's going to help the war effort. Now you are going to be amazed. There are 5 kids in 5 countries, each experiencing the horrors of war in their own unique way. And yet, their lives are all going to intersect, and you will be amazed by the connections that are made by these 5 kids in the trying to find their own lines of courage. Now, I had to do this. I had to draw a map of all the connections, and I know you can't read this, but you can see all the lines that are made here of how each of these lives are connected. There were so many of them, I had to map it out, and this is what I came up with. Maisie Chan's Last Chance is a story about family and what you do for the love of family. Maisie is a Chinese-American girl. She doesn't know her grandparents very well. She calls them Oma and Opa. Maisie lives in California. Her grandparents live all the way in Minnesota. But this summer, Maisie and her mom are going to go to Last Chance, Minnesota. Grandpa Opa is sick, and they need to help Oma run their Chinese restaurant, which is called the Golden Palace. So during the day, Mom and Oma go to the restaurant where they argue a lot. But Opa and Maisie stay home together. And the favorite thing that Maisie loves to do with Opa is play poker and also listen to stories about Maisie's great-great-great-grandpa, Lucky Chen. Now, Lucky had been living in China. He came to America as a young man. He wanted to make his fortune. And Maisie is amazed and fascinated about how he got from California to Last Chance, Minnesota. She's also very heartbroken because Lucky had a lot of bad things happen to him because of mean, prejudiced people. He's accused of stealing something that he didn't do. He's shot at twice. Twice people try to burn down his restaurant. Just breaks Maisie's heart. And then she realizes, after 160 some years, there's still mean people, prejudiced people who are doing nasty things that Maisie has to deal with too. At the end of Maisie Chan's Last Chance, there's a picture of the author and more pictures and stories of her family's history when they were here in America, which I think you'll enjoy reading. Rav, which is the short for Ravani, is the only one awake that night to notice 7 children sneaking into the abandoned house across the street from his, and he calls them the Midnight Children. 7 kids? Maybe one of them would be just his age and be a friend. You see, Rav doesn't have any friends, something the town bully Donnie won't let him forget. And as it turns out, there is someone his age. Her name is Virginia. She's really spunky. And they start hanging out together. Rav teaches her how to catch frogs in the creek, and Virginia helps Rav deal with the Donnie problem several times. But then Rav starts to notice that these kids are rather secretive, and there's something different about them. They're very cautious. What's going on? And Rav starts having some other questions like, where do they come from, and what are they afraid of? And why aren't there any adults with them? And we start to wonder If Rav finds out the answers to his questions, what's he going to do with that information, and how's that going to affect the Midnight Children? In the secret letters, Colin and Nevaeh's families are in the same business. They help you get rid of your junk at your house and declutter your home. And they are competitors. This summer, both kids are working for their parents. Well, one day, Colin is helping his mom clean out a house, and up in the attic he comes across a battered shoebox that has old letters in them. Now, Colin knows right away he should just toss everything out. But he's curious about what's in the letters, so he takes them home to read them. And he soon discovers that the letters are all written by a boy named Toby to his friend, a girl named Rosemary. And these letters were written back in the 1970s, like 50-some years ago. Whoa! Well, with a little digging, Colin finds out where Toby is living, or had been living, and so he goes over to Toby's old house, and that's how he meets Nevaeh. Now, long story short, Nevaeh and Colin work together, and they discover a second shoebox full of letters that Rosemary wrote to Toby back in the 1970s. The kids are fascinated by these old letters, even though they're not familiar with all the things that Toby and Rosemary wrote about back in the 1970s, like old TV shows and old movies. And they start to think, I wonder if Toby and Rosemary are still alive. I wonder if we could find them and return their secret letters. Now, I would like to take a minute to tell you about my connections with this book. The 1970s were a very important decade in my life. I graduated from high school. I graduated from Iowa State. I moved to Dubuque. I started teaching 5th grade at Audubon School, and I met Mr. B. Now, Colin and Nevaeh didn't understand all the pop culture references, but I did. These were things that were part of my life. There was mention in the book the secret letters about the book Free to Be You and Me. And that book was mentioned in the book. Here's my copy of it. It says that I bought it in 1975, and I have my name in the front. I was still Miss Thomas at the time. I used to use this book with my 5th graders at Audubon. So there's a fun connection right there. I really enjoyed my walk down memory lane as I read the secret letters. Our next book is the first in a series of fantasy novels. I think the plans right now are to have at least 3 of them. And they all star Nick Blake and the Remarkables. This one is subtitled The Manifester Prophecy. Now, Remarkables are remarkable creatures who do remarkable things. We're just unremarkables. Each remarkable has a glow around them, and that's how they can distinguish who they are and if they are remarkables or not. For example, manifestors are at the highest level, and they have a golden glow around them. Nicole, but they call her Nick, and her dad are both manifestors. Now, even though Nick is 12 years old, her dad hasn't started showing her how to use her gift as a manifester. Dad has chosen to live in the unremarkable world, and Nick's best friend is her next door neighbor, JP. Now, Nick and JP are so excited because their very favorite author, TJ Retro, is going to be at their local bookstore, and he's going to be autographing books. This is so cool. Well, you can imagine how surprised Nick is when she walks into the bookstore. There's Mr. Retro, and he has a golden glow around him. He's a manifester too. And she finds out he knows her dad really well. And then starts a series of events that turns Nick's life upside down. She finds out that her dad has been lying to her about a lot of things for years. And now Dad has been arrested for a crime that he did not commit. And the only way to save him is if Nick can find a magical tool that has been missing for years. But how can she do it? She doesn't know how to use her gift yet. And what is this manifestor prophecy? Ooh, so many questions. On the Air with Zoe Washington is what we call a sequel, which means it's a second book in a series with using the same characters. Now, the first book about Zoe Washington was called From the Desk of Zoe Washington. It was on the Iowa Children's Choice Award list a couple years ago. And in that book, you learn that Zoe's dad, she calls him Marcus, is in jail for something he didn't do. Zoe finds information that proves that he's innocent, and he's released from school, or from jail. Now, it's 2 years later, and Zoe and Marcus are working together at a friend's bakery. Marcus shares a dream that he has. He would like to open his own restaurant someday. And Zoe says, "Why not do it right now?" And she convinces Marcus to go for it. But he soon finds out that because he was in jail, even though he was innocent, people don't want to loan him money to open up his own restaurant. And Zoe starts to realize, I bet there's other people who have been in jail who are having the same problem. And other people need to know about this. So she decides to start her own podcast. Here she is with her microphone. And she's going to tell people about what's happened when there are others who have been in jail who are kind of getting a raw deal. But do you think anybody's going to listen to something called On Air with Zoe Washington? Over and Out is another one of those historical fiction books. It is a made-up story, but it's based on something that really did happen. It's set in East Berlin, Germany in the early 1970s. In 1961, the East German government decided to build a wall right down the middle of Berlin. It divided the city, it divided the country, it divided families. Sophie and her mom live in East Berlin, and that is not a pleasant place to live. The government tells you where you can live, what TV shows you can watch, and also it tells you what job you're going to have once you graduate from high school. Sophie's next door neighbor's named Monica, and she dreams of being a teacher someday, but the government says she's going to be a pharmacist. And when Monica says, "I don't want to do that," she's labeled an enemy of the state. A government official comes to Sophie and says, "We want you to spy on Monica. Tell us where she goes, who she sees." What? Monica is like a big sister to her. She doesn't want to spy on her big sister. But she also knows that if she says no, bad things are going to happen. So she says yes, and she starts telling the government where Monica's going and who she sees. And Sophie goes, "This is ridiculous. I can't continue this way." And she decides there's got to be a way to get out of East Berlin. But she also knows that going over the wall can be very dangerous. Most people who try are killed. There's secret police called the Stasi who are always watching everything you do. Now, Sophie loves science, and she would like to be an inventor someday. And she's hoping she can invent something that will get her family and friends over the wall and out of East Berlin. Read the book to see if she's successful. Playing Through the Turnaround is another story about a group of kids. And again, it has our alternating chapters so that we can read the story from different people's points of view. All of the kids are musicians, and their favorite class that they have together is called Jazz Lab. Cassie plays the saxophone, and she uses her music to express her feelings that are inside of her. Jake plays the clarinet. He's got some issues going on with his family at home. Lily plays the bass, and she struggles in every class except for Jazz Lab. Max plays the piano, and he always wants to do only what's right. And then there's Nick on the trumpet. He's just glad he's got a place where he can belong. Well, what makes Jazz Lab so special is the teacher, Mr. Lewis. Not only does he teach them new musical techniques, but he brings out their creativity, and they just love the time that they spend together. So you can imagine how devastated the kids are when Mr. Lewis quits. Why? They've heard rumors that the school board has made some budget cuts, and they are trying to eliminate classes and clubs. Well, this just is not right. And the kids decide that they're going to have a series of protests to tell everybody how upset they are with this turn of events. But who's going to listen to them? They're just a bunch of kids. Will they just have to keep playing through the turnaround? A rover's story is a story about a rover. Exactly. This rover is a robot that moves about, and his name is Resilience. They call him Res for short. And Res is designed to collect data and soil samples off of Mars. Now, as soon as his computer is turned on, Res starts collecting data by listening to what the humans are saying, and he discovers that humans have emotions. And he thinks, I'd like to have emotions too, like happiness and excitement. He can communicate with something else in the lab. It's a flying drone that is going to go to Mars with him, and he names the drone Fly. Good name, right? And once Fly and Res get to the surface of Mars, their job is to find another rover who's gone offline several years ago, and they don't know what happened to him. So their job is to see if they can find this other rover. Now, there's another part of this story that I found interesting. Again, we have a character named Sophie, and this little girl writes letters. Even though she knows Res can't read them, she writes letters to Res and tells him how proud she is of him and how excited she is. Her mom's the chief engineer of the project. And so Sophie's letters are sprinkled throughout the book. They're all part of a rover's story. Singing with Elephants has a little different format. It's called a novel in verse, and what that means is it's written and reads like a poem. So this book would not take you very long to read because there aren't a lot of words on the page. Even though this is a fiction book, one of the main characters is a real person. Her name was Gabriela Mistral. She won the Nobel Prize for Literature. In 1947, Gabrielle was living in California, and that's why the book is set there. This is a story about Oriole and her family. They moved to California because Grandma needs some medical care, and they are moving to California from Cuba. Oriole doesn't know very much English because she's always lived in Cuba, and so the kids at school make fun of her, unfortunately. Now, one day, Oriole's out walking and she sees Gabriela sitting under the tree writing poetry. And even though there's a difference in their ages, they make an instant connection. And Gabriela helps Oriole with her English and helps her to express herself through writing. Oriole's mom and dad are veterinarians, and they decide they're going to open up a vet clinic and ranch to help wounded animals while they're in California. Oriole loves working at the clinic, and she doesn't even mind cleaning up the poop. She is thrilled when an elephant arrives at the ranch who's going to have a baby, and then something terrible happens to the elephant. And it's up to Oriole to save the day. She's encouraged by Gabriela to use her words to save the elephant so that she can continue singing with elephants. Swim Team is a story about Bree, and she and her dad are moving from New York to Florida after Dad gets a new job. And once they get there, Bree notices there's a lot of swimming pools in Florida. And Bree doesn't really know how to swim. Well, she goes to her new school and she's registering for classes, and the only thing that fits into her schedule to fill it out is taking the dreaded Swim Class 101. Remember I said Bree doesn't know how to swim? Well, there's a woman in her apartment complex named Miss Edda who learns about Bree's problem of not knowing how to swim, and she volunteers to teach Bree how to swim. Bree happily accepts her offer, and not only does Miss Edda teach Bree how to swim, but she teaches her about some competitive swim skills. Bree is a quick learner, and before you know it, she's on the swim team at school. And not only does Miss Edda teach Bree about swimming, but she teaches her about her heritage. She teaches her how to be part of a team, and she also teaches her about the power of forgiveness. I think you're really going to like reading Swim Team. And oh, did I tell you, Swim Team just happens to be a graphic novel. Thirst takes place in India, in a large city named Mumbai. Minnie and her family live in the poorest section of town where there is only minimal access to water. Minnie often has to stand in line with her water bucket to get water from the community faucet. Well, one night, Minnie and Sanjay, her brother, and two friends are out and about, and they see some really bad guys stealing water from a tanker truck. And the two guys decided they're going to go investigate to see what's going on. And unfortunately, the bad guys discover them, and they start chasing them. Well, luckily, Sanjay and his friend are pretty fast, and they don't get caught. But the parents decide, just for safety, they better leave town for a while. So Sanjay and his friend have to go with relatives out in the country. And then Minnie's mom gets sick from drinking contaminated water, and she has to go stay with her sister a while until she recovers. Mom is a maid for some people who live in a fancy apartment downtown, and she doesn't want to lose her job, so she goes to her employer and says, "Is it okay if Minnie is a substitute for me, and a substitute maid for me?" And the employer says, "Yeah, that'll be okay until you get better." Poor Minnie's world now has been turned upside down. She misses her mom, her mother, and her brother. She's working as a maid for people who have things she can only dream about, like having running water in her house. She has to continue doing her own chores as well as the things that her mom used to do. She's worried about her folks coming, or the bad guys coming and stealing more water. And on top of everything else, she's got to keep up with things at school. She has to study for her final exam, and if she doesn't pass, she's not going to go on to the next grade. All because all of these problems are because of thirst for water. Our last book is called Wild Oak, and you will meet Maggie, who has a problem. Maggie stutters, and she can't get her words out like she wants to when she's talking to people. Interestingly enough, when she talks to animals, she doesn't stutter. Well, as you can imagine, it's very difficult for Maggie at school, and so her mom suggests that she go take a break and go live with her grandpa for a while. Grandpa lives out in Wild Oak Forest, and Maggie happily accepts the offer. And actually, Wild Oak has 2 stories with it. Again, alternating chapters. The second chapter is about this white snow leopard called Rumpus. Rumpus was given to a rich lady for as a birthday present, who discovered too late that a snow leopard would not make a good house pet. Rumpus destroys the apartment. And the lady hires a guy, and she says, "I don't care where you take him, but just take him away from here. I don't want him anymore." Well, the guy takes Rumpus out to Wild Oak Forest and just dumps him. Rumpus is not prepared to survive on his own. Happily, by a twist of fate, Maggie and Rumpus's paths cross, and you'll be amazed how they help each other, especially when there's a developer who wants to destroy Wild Oak Forest. Okay, show me your bookmarks. Oh, I'm seeing a lot of stars. I'm seeing a lot of circles. Wonderful. How many, okay, bookmarks down. How many of you are going to make it a goal that you are going to read at least 2 books so that you can vote in March? All right.